You know those classic books and plays we all read in school? Well, what if I told you they could mean something completely different depending on who's reading them and when? We're about to dive into a theory that says our understanding of culture is never neutral. Nope, it's always shaped by history, politics, and power.
So let's start with a little puzzle. How is it possible for a play, I'm talking the exact same words, same characters, same plot, to be seen in totally opposite ways centuries apart? That's the big question we're going to unpack today.
All right, to get to the bottom of this, let's take a look at a really famous example. Shakespeare's play, The Tempest.
Okay, so back in Shakespeare's time, if you were an English person watching The Tempest, you'd probably see a story about restoring the natural order of things. Prospero, he's the rightful duke, and he uses his magic to get his power back. Makes sense. But now, let's fast forward to the 20th century. Imagine you're reading that same play, but from the perspective of the Caribbean, a place completely shaped by colonization. All of a sudden, the play becomes this powerful metaphor for that exact history. Prospero isn't just a magician anymore, he's a colonizer. And Caliban? He's not some monster, he's the native person fighting for his own land.
So here's the huge takeaway from that. The text itself didn't change a bit, but the world around it did. See, the meaning isn't some timeless thing that's locked inside the words on the page. Instead, that meaning is produced by the history and the politics of the moment you're reading it in. No text ever exists in a vacuum.
This whole idea that history and politics literally create meaning, well, that's the core of a theory that came out of Britain in the 1980s. It gives us a brand new lens for reading, and it's called cultural materialism.
So, what is it formally? Cultural materialism basically sees literature not as some kind of magical creation from a lone genius, but as a material product. Think about it. Just like a car or a table, a play or a book is built inside a specific society, with all its real-world struggles and power dynamics. It's a product of its world, plain and simple.
One of the theory's most important thinkers, Raymond Williams, put it just like this. What he's really saying is that reading Shakespeare isn't somehow better or more cultured than listening to the Beatles. They're both just social practices. They're different ways a culture tells stories about itself. And cultural materialism says we've got to study all of it if we really want to understand how a society actually works.
So where did this lens even come from? I mean, to really get a grip on cultural materialism, we've got to understand the political world that made it. It definitely didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The theory's roots really go back to left-wing academics in the 60s and 70s. These thinkers were pretty suspicious of the whole literary canon. They started asking, hey, why are these books considered great art, while these other things are just pop culture? The name itself was coined in 1977, but the theory really caught fire in the 1980s, and it was a direct political response to the conservative, nationalist vibe of Thatcher's Britain. Now, to understand their political fire, you need to know this one crucial concept from the Marxist thinker Antonio Gramsci: hegemony. It's the idea that power isn't just about police and armies. It's also about making the ruling class's values seem like common sense, like they're just natural and the way things are supposed to be. And how do you do that? Through culture, through art, books, and movies.
And this leads to a pretty radical and maybe even an unsettling idea about where great art actually comes from. It suggests that behind every beautiful masterpiece, there might be a hidden story of power and of oppression.
The philosopher Walter Benjamin put it this way. What he means is that history is pretty much always written by the victors. The beautiful cultural treasures we celebrate, they're often the spoils of war and conquest. So, from a cultural materialist view, saying Shakespeare is a universal genius isn't just an innocent literary opinion. It starts to sound uncomfortably close to the kind of boast English imperialism made as it was expanding the British Empire.
Cultural materialism wasn't developing in a bubble, though. It actually has an American cousin called New Historicism, and comparing the two really helps us see what makes cultural materialism so unique.
Now, both of these theories are absolutely fascinated by history and power, and you'll find both of them talking about Shakespeare a lot. But their influences are different. New historicism pulls a lot from the philosopher Foucault, while cultural materialism, as we've seen, is rooted in Marxist thinkers. And that leads to the biggest difference of all: their goals. New historicism wants to understand how power worked in the past, but cultural materialism studies the past specifically so it can intervene in the politics of the present.
And that is the absolute key takeaway, right there. Cultural materialism isn't just some abstract academic game. It is, and I'm quoting one of its founders here, committed to the transformation of a social order. The argument is that how we read books has real political stakes, for all of us, right here and now.
So that brings us to our final part, If reading is a political act, what does that actually mean for us? How does this theory change how we should approach a book, especially one that seems to support some really outdated or even oppressive ideas?
Well, the critic Alan Sinfield laid out 4 possible ways to go. 1, you could just reject the text outright. 2, you could try to reread it to find some kind of hidden radical message. 3, you could just ignore what it's saying and focus only on its literary style. Or, and this is the main cultural materialist strategy, you can deflect to history. That means you put the text back in its original time, and then you trace how its meaning has been used by powerful institutions over the centuries, like how the Tempest was used to make colonial rule seem okay. The goal is to expose how a text supports a dominant ideology, and then you can start to read it against the grain.
You know, the influence of this approach has been absolutely huge. Today, it's way more common for literary studies to be suspicious of that old canon, to focus on issues of race, gender, and sexuality, and to see historical context as completely essential. Cultural materialism helped give criticism a much sharper political edge, one that's focused not just on the past, but on the world we're all living in today.
So, the next time you pick up a classic, one of those supposedly timeless works of art, you've now got a new lens to look through. Ask yourself, whose story is this text really telling? Whose values is it holding up? And maybe most importantly, whose story is being silenced?